Hello and welcome to this week's Ace Role Playing Games. Eventually will be podcast, so we'll call it the Ace Role Playing Games podcast now. So that way, when I do start putting out the audio for this, it'll be a podcast there as well. So there we go. And this week we had our first session. We had our session 0 for the Fallout role playing game a la Savage Worlds, and it's one that I've been helping to create a little bit, and I helped do some character creation as well. Um, Helped modify some ancestry so we could get a ghoul, and strangely enough, an assaultron that is missing all of its guns and everything. So it just slams things. And Jonah even got to do session 1, or the last part of that as the start to the storyline. And he's planning on making it a long-term one, but we're also going to kind of put a rule into the Ace Role Playing Games Club that in order to keep this to be a club and to make more friends, we're going to rotate tables. And so you can't play more than 4 weeks at one table. And then you can pick back up and drop, as needed. So you can play 4 weeks at one table and then switch to another table for 4 weeks or 5 weeks. We might do 5 weeks because then that gives time for a session 0 and 4 weeks of gameplay. But we want to try and just kind of keep things mixing up, because one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is we avoid becoming a clique. We don't want the same people to play at the same table every single time, because there might be people who could fit in at their table, but there's no space for them. Or there might be people who could fit in at the table and they're afraid to ask to enter at the table. Or they might think they could fit well at the table and it turns out no, they don't. And so by experimenting, we're going to try and find some better ways of running this club. That said, as the title of the video today tells you, we're going to talk about the great character concept. We're going to talk about the ideas that go into having a good character concept and ways to improve the way you do those characters. So this will make it so your players can actually create characters that fit in your world, and that we can find gentle ways of saying no to those who want to make ones that don't fit or are too intentionally overpowered and things like that. So let's talk about, first of all, I've already talked a little bit about this in the Ancestries video, but your characters are balanced. That is the ancestors, the races, whatever you want to call them, they are balanced, at least in Savage Worlds, to a point that humans are no better or no worse than an elf, than a dwarf, than a half-folk, than an android. They're all balanced around that 3-2 points. Now, for a good character concept to work well for us, the game master first needs to decide what genre they're going to run. Now, if the game master is wise, they can and should take it to their players, because if the players don't want to play that genre, it doesn't matter how cool the game master thinks it can be, it's not going to work. And at the same time, if a player wants to play a genre and the game master's not into it, it's not going to work. So you guys got to find a balance, a meeting of the minds there, and decide what genre and setting you're going to be playing. I mean, as an example, Deadlands Noir, the typical setting for it is New Orleans, 1935. So during the middle of the Great Depression, and things are going on. But the thing is about Deadlands is they have put out the Deadlands Companion, the Deadlands Noir Companion, and this book actually gives the setting rules to tweak the setting of Deadlands Noir a little bit to include Chicago 1927, so going back in time, or Shan Fan, which is kind of a Deadlands unique version of San Francisco in 1939. So you could do something like The Warrior there, or you could do Lost Angels, which is Los Angeles, 1946. So you could do something in Old Hollywood, kind of almost an LA Confidential. You could almost do that there. And then finally, the last one is City of Gloom, which is Salt Lake City, Utah, 1950. So you could choose to do any of those 5 settings. You got the 4 from the companion, and then the 5th one being New Orleans, 1935. And by choosing whichever one of those you're going to choose, you're going to choose characters appropriately. So it would be appropriate to play a warrior type character in and even though the warriors set when it's set there in the late 1800s, the warrior, it's up on HBO. It's not a series I would recommend for teens. It actually has a lot of nudity and language and violence, and I would not recommend it. But at the same time, it's a lot of what the original concept of Bruce Lee's story that was pitched and sold for Kung Fu, which is basically this guy who wanders around the Wild West, and he'd been trained in Kung Fu over in Asia and then brought it over to America. And that's still a pretty good idea. And that feeling's been incorporated into Deadlands, the original Weird West setting. But in Shan Fan, you could have a martial artist character, and they fit in that genre. They fit in that storyline. But, as an example, a sword-carrying samurai running around the college campus of East Texas University isn't exactly going to work for any other day other than Halloween. So whatever genre you and your players decide on, that's the one you need to go with. And those are the characters you're going to want to play. So that's where one thing that Savage Worlds does really well is when you have picked the genre that you're going to play, if it's part of their stock, like Deadlands or Deadlands Noir or Deadlands Lost Colony or Deadlands Hell on Earth, any of those, they will give you a list of archetypes. And those archetypes are useful for starting to get your mind to think about characters that fit into that world. But that also gives you a chance to think of what kind of characters won't fit into that world. So, funny enough, Deadlands Noir can handle like a cybernetic creature, a cybernetic person who's had their brain put into a pan, and there is that weird science element. But on the flip side, if you're playing, I don't know, medieval, it would have to be a magical powered cybernetic organism rather than something else, because quite frankly the magic powered ones, excuse me, the magic is going to be the only thing that can fuel like something articulated and robotic and stuff like that in a setting like that. And so off the wall things kind of get harder to include. Now, as an example, I had a player who insisted on playing a Slug Cat in a superhero game. They had to play a Slug Cat. And that's because the player thought that the Slug Cat was adorable and they wanted to just draw the Slug Cat on the back of their paper. And it really didn't fit. So that's where it would have helped had that player known the genre a little bit better. But the player was young and inexperienced and hadn't read too much of the genre. So that's kind of forgivable. But that said, let's talk for a minute about the Session Zero. Because this is where Session Zero and character concept come together. Well, in character creation. Before you create the character, you want to have a concept of what you're going to do, so that way you can use the rules to create that character the way you want to create them. So, for example, in Session Zero, when we're sitting down and we're establishing our game table social contract, which is basically that you as a game master promised to give us as players a fun opportunity to tell a story, and we all agree that dice are going to be used to determine random outcomes and outcomes where failure could be interesting. And we agree to abide by the rules of the dice. And we agree to abide by the rulings of the game master. That is the social contract that we put together. Then, we having agreed on the genre, having agreed that this is what we're going to play, we all start talking about characters. And it's wise if you're players will discuss amongst themselves, and you can help be part of this discussion to help arbitrate decisions and stuff. But have them talk amongst themselves about what kind of character they think will fit best with the initial story seed that you're going to start off with. So, for example, in East Texas University, chances are the character you're going to play is going to be an archetypical college student. And that's why, even in the archetypes, they have the cheerleader, the jock, the stranger in a strange land. So, you could be an exchange student. You could be the local yokel who got into college because he's actually pretty smart and he's got a good major. You could be the kid who's gone to East Texas University to protest and be an activist and things like that. You could be a computer game programmer. You could be the kid that the parents are hoping that a year or two at school will help straighten them out. Whatever you want to start as, those are just ideas to get you going. Those aren't locked in characters that you need to play. So this is why we need to have the discussion amongst the players, because it goes back to the old party dynamic of D&D and things like that. You would probably want somebody who was good at fighting, somebody who was good at ranged fighting, so that way they can support the in-close fighter and maybe get some of the bad guys down before the in-close fighter gets there. You want somebody probably who's a wizard or a good magic user. You might want to have a thief. That was the whole, and if you read your Tolkien, that's the whole reason why Bilbo was chosen. Because the dwarves needed somebody who could be sneakier and quieter than they to be able to sneak in and take a look around and see what old Smaug was up to. So that's why they hired Bilbo as a burglar. And that was the whole thing. And so it was a really cool opportunity. And that's why you want your characters to all feel they have a cool opportunity, and your players to feel like they can create good characters because they chose a good concept. So, going back to superheroes and the Slug Cat, I was running that game, and I allowed for the Slug Cat because, one, I made it so one of the rules was that player had to transform that character, that Slug Cat character, into a humanoid shape on the regular basis, so they could blend in, because they were an alien. The creature was an alien, and that creature had a really cool prehensile tongue. It had a distance attack with it, and it could grab onto things and swing on it and things like that. So, I mean, hey, I've never seen a creature with a tongue that could do that, so hey, that part was cool. But the character didn't fit 1934 pulp-ish superhero. So I should have said no more vehemently. But at the same time, I wanted this player to get a chance to play. This player hadn't had a chance to play too much, and this player was kind of disruptive to the other table. So I brought that player in. And so that player got to play the Slug Cat. But it's okay to say, if somebody's like at East Texas University saying, oh, I'm playing a foreign exchange student from Japan who's actually a member of a ninja clan, and they always go around campus with a katana strapped to their back. It's okay to blink at them, look at them and say, that doesn't quite fit. Can you come up with something else? And if that means that maybe if you only have like 2 or 3 players, be a little more flexible. But if you're got a table of 5 or 6, it's okay to say, no, that doesn't fit. And if they say, well, then I won't play, you can say, okay, maybe on the next story we can catch you. We'd love to have you, but if you don't want to play a character that fits within this genre, that makes it so you can play a genre-blind character in ETU and play someone who will make some of the foolish mistakes that people make in horror movies, then, maybe that's just not the game you really wanted to play. Maybe the other table will have something you want to play. And you're always welcome to come and go as a member of Ace Role Playing Games Club. You just need to actually make sure that you're being a good citizen as part of the club. So it is okay to say no. With that said, once those characters are decided, then we can use the rules to create those characters. So what I'm going to do over the next several long videos is I'm going to create that 5-person dungeoneering party, and I'm going to put the stats in the stuff below, and then you can just copy and paste them if you want to use them. Those will be my character archetypes. And I'm just going to, like I said, I'm going to do a classic dungeoneering party. I'm going to do a fighter, a ranger, a rogue, a wizard, and a healer. So it could be a cleric or it could be something else, because I mean that's the whole reason why Ken St. Andre made the second role-playing game, made Tunnels and Trolls, because Ken St. Andre didn't like the sort of Christian element that was behind the monks and the priests in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. That was his start, and apparently he's done really well for himself. So what can I say? Now, I hope that you are all getting ready to set up your own tables and really get this going. It'd be great to have this club system proliferate to every game store in the Salt Lake Valley, every game store in Utah County, and make it to every game store in the world. And even if you don't have a game store near you, then maybe you can do an online one. I'm willing to show you how to set up one of those, and we even do it here. And then 2, we can also do it with we can help you set up the clubs in other ways. But remember, I love you. You are amazing, and the world is a better place because you're in it. So let's keep you in it, and I hope to see you at my table. Thanks. Until next time. This is Ace Role Playing Games Club Podcast signing off.